Well, I was at the Woodward Dream Cruise yesterday in southeastern Michigan. For those who don't know, it's the annual event that draws, I think, 1 million plus people and around 40,000 various cars to the show that goes up and down an 8-lane boulevard for about 7 or 8 miles. So it's a pretty awesome show, but tucked in the corner of a parking lot of a dealership was a car that the dealer principal apparently owned. And that is this 1979 American Motors Pacer Wagon that had an apparent 10,000 original miles. And I believe every bit of that because this was the most minty Pacer perhaps that I have ever seen in my lifetime. It was sheer awesomeness, as I said in the title of the video. Now, the AMC Pacer was introduced to the public in 1975 and would continue being sold through 1980. So it had a relatively brief run. It was quite successful early on. It sold 145,000 units in 1975 in its inaugural model year. And that was the first time that American Motors had a launched vehicle that sold over 100,000 units in its first year. The Gremlin, I think, took 2 years to achieve that volume. And of course, I'm referencing another homely-looking car. I don't think anybody could call the Pacer a good-looking car, but it's certainly a unique vehicle. Now, by this point, the Pacer styling had been revamped a little bit. You'll notice that the front, the hood now has this raised, I'll call it power bulge section, which I think was part due to styling. That power bulge was something that was pretty popular at the time with many different automakers, but also to accommodate the V8 engine that was now optional under hood beginning with the 1978 model year. Pacers, when they were introduced in 1975, came standard with a 232 cubic inch inline six. There was an optional 258 cubic inch inline six. But the problem was, despite the Pacer's relatively short length and wheelbase, it only had about a 100-inch wheelbase. It was quite heavy for its size. Car and Driver, in fact, tested a Pacer back in 1975. And when it was loaded up with air conditioning, power steering, power brakes, and those types of items, the car tipped the scales at almost 3,400 pounds, which for a 100-inch wheelbase car and a car that's less than 15 feet in overall length is really a porker. So the Pacer was sold as kind of this wide car, this wide economy car. In other words, you could buy a car that was small, and you didn't have to suffer from the ills of many economy cars, which meant that you were in a very kind of cramped cabin. Here you had Lebensraum. You had room to spread out within your AMC Pacer. And, well, you just didn't have the length or necessarily the cargo carrying capacity when it was introduced. However, because of the weight, the car was quite sluggish, and as a result, it kind of got increasingly powerful options, including that V8 engine that I mentioned, the 304 cubic inch AMC V8 that was offered as an option in 1978 and 1979, which is kind of antithetical to the purpose of the Pacer. It was supposed to be a wide, small kind of economy car. It really wasn't much of an economy car, so to speak, especially when equipped with that V8 engine. The six-cylinder engines did get, I would say on the freeway in the low 20-ish miles per gallon, 20, 21, 22 maybe. With the V8, you probably got 17 or 18 on the freeway, but that really wasn't great by economy car standards. In any case, the Pacer, when it was first developed, was supposed to get GM's Wankel rotary engine that was going to be deployed across the General Motors lineup, with cars like the Vega getting a 2-rotor engine, the Corvette getting a 4-rotor. In fact, there was an experimental 4-rotor Corvette, later renamed the Aerovet. That was a quite stunning vehicle, but that was not to come to fruition as the Wankel cars did not get great fuel economy. They had a hard time passing the emission standards, and General Motors had a hard time getting the tip seals on the rotary engine to last an extended period of time. So AMC was forced to more conventional powertrains under hood, like their inline sixes and later the V8s, in order to power what was their revolutionary wide small car. Now, in order to improve the cargo carrying capacity of the Pacer, the Wagon model that you see here was introduced in the 1977 model year. And interestingly, AMC did not lengthen the wheelbase for the Wagon. It was the same 100-inch wheelbase, but they added 5 inches, roughly 5 inches in overall length. And you can kind of see that. Look at the overhang aft of the rear wheel. It's relatively large. But this allowed AMC to use a lot of common components and the undercarriage. And the doors, everything back to the B-pillar is effectively the same as the Pacer Coupe, but you have that area after the B-pillar that is different. This one is a deluxe trim, the Pacer DL, with the optional wheels and vent windows, which were optional on all Pacers. The rears on the wagons did get the vent windows standard. You can see those glass panes that will open on the rear, but the front vent windows were optional and I guess great for smokers. But as we examine the styling of the Pacer, you have a number of novel things. You have what was originally going to be a very low hood, particularly the cowl is quite low on this car, but the front end, the leading edge of the hood, was even lower when introduced. By 1978, they had, as I said, that power bulge to accommodate the V8 engine. But again, this car was going to use the Wagon engine, which is a very compact power source, and AMC really had to shoehorn its six-cylinder engine into the Pacers. In fact, the back cylinder or a couple cylinders kind of tucked in underneath the windshield because, again, the car wasn't originally designed to have that. But you do see another thing here in terms of the features. You have this, I would say, monocoque-type body, very similar to the fuselage era Chrysler cars and even the Oldsmobile Tornado, devoid of the wheel arches, where the midsection is also pushed quite far downward like the Tornado, or the widest part of the car. Kind of gives the car a good-looking stance, like it is wide. They are trying to make it look visually wide. You have to imagine the car without this body side molding on it, but well, you know, it is, like I said, it's got similar themes to other really pioneering American cars of the era. No, let's say, extreme creases or shoulders or anything like that. It's really just one continuous section, including the glass and the sheet metal. Now, another styling feature you'll note of the Pacer is obviously its basket handle kind of design, where the B-pillar goes up and over the roof. That was something that was popularized in the mid-1950s, beginning with the Ford Crown Victoria, I would say. I think was the first domestic car that I can recall that had that band that went over the roof. And that became an increasingly popular styling trend into the 80s, I would say. And that's going to be the subject for another video, the basket handle design, because many cars really employed that. From kind of started on everyday cars like that Crown Victoria, but then it migrated to sports cars like the 82 Camaro and Firebird. But here you see it on the Pacer. And you obviously see the wide expanse of glass in this photo. You can note that the door panel actually has this elevated portion associated with it for the armrest, and that was to disguise the fact that the glass could actually not go all the way down into the door. There was so much glass that they raised the door panel such that when you lowered the glass, you couldn't discern that it wasn't all the way lowered. That's the function of that raised section of the door panel. And out back, you have a very different hatch from what was on the regular Pacer sedan. The regular Pacer sedan had the rear quarter glass that really wrapped around partway to the rear, and then the hatch was a bit narrower here, probably for functionality. The hatch is significantly wider. That obviously would enable you to load cargo better and just enable you to use, I would say, the body and its cargo carrying capabilities more effectively than what could be done on the regular Pacer sedan. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't going to go and open the car door and the windows were up, so I couldn't get the best picture of the DL interior. But by this point, AMC had really made it quite deluxe. Look at those puffy, perforated vinyl seats that were extremely comfortable. You have the fake wood grain trim on the steering wheel as well as the passenger side portion of the dashboard. You have some bright work trim on the door panel, bright work for the door handle. And you could see that raised section of the door panel I was mentioning to disguise the fact that the glass didn't go all the way down. But overall, a pretty rich and sumptuous interior on these DLs. There was even a Pacer Limited for 1979 and 1980 that had a leather interior. Boy, I would love to have one of those. If somebody's got a DL Pacer or a Limited Pacer with low miles in great shape, and preferably the coupe as opposed to the wagon, please email me. Oh, I would love to have that. this Pacer, if this were for sale, made my heart flutter. It was just absolutely awesome. And it had quite a bit of optional equipment, including the air conditioning, the vent windows, as I mentioned, the DL package. I believe this was a 6-cylinder, not an 8-cylinder, because the 8s did have a badge on it that said V8, and this one did not have it. Nice 4-spoke, I would say luxury wheel as well in these Pacers. These did have rack and pinion steering, believe it or not. So very precise steering. And then also the Pacer, I believe, was the car that introduced ceramic frit on the windshield, that kind of blackout area that really enabled automakers to save money because they didn't have to finish the trim behind that blackout area. And that was something that automakers always finished the trim on the A-pillars and on the leading edge of the IP so that it looked good. But you didn't have to do that if you just blacked it out. And now, of course, the blackout area on cars is huge, so they don't have to finish it. But I think the Pacer was the first car to really introduce that in terms of American cars. Now, before we close out, let's take a walk around the Pacer itself. Oh, look at that power bulge hood hiding the 258 cubic inch inline 6-cylinder that makes a little more than 110 horsepower, I believe, by this point in time. So not much power for the power bulge hood. But boy, that's just like a little happy-looking car, isn't it? Again, you can see the vent windows, the sumptuous interior, pretty good rear seat room as well, and cargo space. The bumper obviously sits way proud of the body, humorously, kind of like the Matador coupes because of the bumper impact standards from this time. And I think the Pacer Wagon unfortunately suffered from that more than even the coupe did. With, boy, this bumper is really sticking out proud from the body. Notice, as I was mentioning, the monocoque style body sides with that widest portion that's quite low on the car. No creases really, so to speak of, just generally smooth surfaces and the glass integrated into the overall design, as opposed to a car like the 61 Continental where the glass panes are, I would say, distinctly different from the sheet metal and a purposeful break from it. Love those AMC wheels that were optional as well. And the, of course, AMC round outside rear view mirror. One of those front bumper also juts out pretty far, I guess, as you would expect during this time frame. And as we come back to the front 3/4 view, you get one last look of the wonderful, homely 1979 AMC Pacer Wagon. So what are your thoughts on this particular 79 AMC Pacer? I think that the car overall was just pretty amazing in terms of how ingenious it was in trying to find a market niche, this wide, small car that didn't exist. It's too bad it didn't get GM's Wankel engine. But then again, if it had received that, it also wouldn't have great fuel economy. The Pacer was a bit of a porker in part because it was sharing so many components with other AMCs, and that really didn't allow it to get the fuel economy of, I think, what buyers were expecting. Although it wasn't horrible, it certainly wasn't great. But the car was comfortable, and if you got the DL, it was pretty quiet inside. You got extra sound deadening insulation. These were unibody cars, so you kind of need that in order to have that isolated cabin experience. Very reliable engines and transmissions, whether the AMC 6s, the AMC 8-cylinders, excellent engines, very reliable, well manufactured and durable. The transmissions during this time, the automatics were Chrysler Torque Flights, so very reliable as well on the transmission front. Your AMCs would keep running forever so long as the tin worm didn't get them from the road salt. That was really the Achilles heel for these cars, particularly being unibody. And, well, aside from that, I would say that the Pacer also shared so many components and had some innovative things. Like I said, that ceramic frit around the windshield glass did have rack and pinion steering. It did share a lot of chassis components with other AMC vehicles. It was also innovative for the Wagon not to have a longer wheelbase from the coupe, just to extend the overall length. So a lot of cool things and cost-saving moves by the Pacer that, of course, make it something that I find really interesting. But put a comment in the comment section and let me know. Thanks again for watching.